So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto and Demon Slayer Got Harem? So let's start the series. A 13-year-old boy was running through a snow-covered wilderness with a small, unconscious girl in his arms. Nezuko, don't die, the child begged, looking so exhausted and terrified that he may have seen a devil. Don't die. I'm gonna save you, he responded. You can't die, as tears started to form in his eyes. Your big brother is definitely going to save you, he shouted to the sky as he continued to walk, despite his exhaustion. In a room within a lodge on top of a mountain, candles were lit around a lone man who was meditating. He looked to be around 18 years old with shaggy sun-kissed blonde hair with white tips that dropped down to his shoulder. The man was muscular, having a body that looked built for agility and speed while giving the appearance that it could break the hardest of stone, and a narrow jaw. The man was wearing a long black cloak, think of Naruto friend Gaiden cloak, that went all the way down to his shins, were black sandals that protected all but the toes. Underneath the cloak was a dark and tight black, sleeveless shirt that showed off his toned arms, think of Zabuza's second look, with a strip of leather going diagonally around his upper body, and baggy dark red pants that were held up by an orange rope. The pants were tapped at shins. He had a necklace around his neck that held a green crystal, and tied around his forehead was a long piece of orange cloth that had a piece of metal with an engraved leaf symbol attached to the cloth. The last things he had were two swords. The first was a long chakuto with a black scabbard and a matching hilt that was carried horizontally on his waist by the rope. The second sword was a large broadsword that was as tall as an average man and was shaped like a butcher knife. The blade has the cutout of a circle near the top and a semi-cutout circle near the handle. The broadsword was held by the leather strap that the man was wearing. The things that really stood out was that he had 3 fox-like marks on both of his cheeks and 2 horns on his forehead. The man didn't open his eyes, even when he heard footsteps coming toward him. The footsteps were those of an old man wearing a standard goblin mask. The old man said, Naruto-san, in a soft, comforting voice. One eye opened partially in a slow drawl, revealing a piece of a blood-red eye. Yes, Urokodaki-san? He said in a way that was so easygoing and relaxed that it could have soothed anyone. This was quite interesting. It will be the first time a boy had a demon. The statement, I'll be going to find a boy that's accompanied with a demon girl, I'll return later this evening, seems to be made by almost everyone, excluding Urokodaki. Really, why? Naruto inquired in his relaxed style, but suddenly there was a hint of interest. Tomioka says that the girl won't hurt a human, the old man replied, his voice tinged with mistrust. Saying, You are going to train him, aren't you? The old man nodded. If the girl doesn't hurt humans, yes. Naruto nodded his head and closed his eye once more. He repeated the words, Good luck, Urokodaki-san, just before the retiring Hashira left. If you're willing, put traps around the mountain, the elderly man replied, and without further comment, he left the hut. Naruto let a small smile slip onto his lips, aware that something important was about to happen. It seems to have started around a year ago, when he and his Naruto companion got into a fight with Kagaya. The blonde was using a broken Kubikura Bocho that he had somehow snatched from Suigetsu, a friend of Naruto's. In any case, he took the very foolish choice without the others knowing, because he got a vision of what would happen if another Akatsuki showed up and they tried to revive the bunny god after he saw the blood trickling off the shattered sword. He went into his head to talk to Seijiji under the guise of trying to gain further guidance from the sage, and then he communicated his concerns to the creator of core energy. He snatched the moon half from Naruto's friend and pushed himself to absorb Kagaya just before they were about to seal the deity, because the sage couldn't reject his logic. The consequences were damned. The entire process of becoming a deity came with alterations, thus his hair color altered slightly, and he gained those Rinna Sharingan eyes and some awesome horns. He shouldn't have done that because he was incredibly tired after murdering that coward Black Zetsu. That was a no-go because the team claimed he was going to launch this whole fucking revolution. Things became serious after he and his companion Naruto reached a consensus while they were laying on the ground after both of their asses had been thrashed. Since it was done to prevent Kaguya, Naruto's companion didn't really gripe about having his moon portion taken away. After he and his Naruto friend fought and created this black hole from a Rasengan versus Chidori, he reportedly had to decide between saving himself by spending the remainder of his core energy to get away or saving his friend, who was about to die from blood loss due to his stump if he didn't seek help. Clearly choosing option number 2, he seized the Uchiha and threw him to the location where he felt Sakura and Kakashi-sensei. After that, he collapsed to the ground and tried to drive Naruto's friend's abandoned sword into the ground, but he was unable to pull it out of its sheath due to his lack of strength, and he was soon drawn into the black hole. As he passed across space, more modifications took place. The first was that he was absorbing the Biju. He had taken his friend's core energy for himself after he had sobbed violently and said goodbye to them in their last moments. His personality changed as a result, and he became aware of these changes as he journeyed across space, sensing his relaxed disposition and specific traits from all the Biju coming together. Shikaka's madness and his skill with sand. Matatabi's hellfire was accompanied with a protectiveness. Isabu's laziness led to coral and water control. He was inspired by Son Goku's lava. With steam, Koka was calm. Poison corrupted Saiken's benevolence. Komiai's enthusiasm allowed him to control insects. Gyuki's intelligence allowed him to learn about seals. The desire for blood that accompanied Kurama's ability to see the bad. It was an amazing feeling to be flung out of the wormhole into this place at night, hundreds of feet in the air, and then fall directly on top of the peak Hirokodaki-san resided next to. Even though it hurt a lot, it was quite great that he was able to restore his arm after acquiring qualities from the Biju. A few hours later the old man found him. He tied him up with some rope and hauled him all the way down to the top of the mountain after the old guy became furious and mentioned something about an upper moon. The blonde was sleeping down on a futon inside a cabin when Naruto woke up, having actually fainted midway through the hike. Because of his distinctive features, the man initially thought he was a demon and tried to cut off his neck. Luckily, the man's neck could not be severed by the blade. After some time of just looking about, he could see his 2 blades and his ripped leaf headband on the ground. Then Isabu's laziness took over and he decided to lie down on the futon. He was about to fall asleep, though, when the old man showed up and instantly apologized for trying to murder him. Then this cute blonde started answering with gibberish when he was asked 20 questions concerning demons. Eventually, Urokodaki-san abandoned him. Following a few days of recuperation and rest, this man by the name of Tomioka suddenly showed up. He appeared to be a laid-back person at first, but then the idiot tried to murder him. Guys and gals, Naruto had been resting and getting stronger over the past few days. He was then able to combat Obito for a short while and knocked him unconscious. When Urokodaki-san later showed in, he was not amused that the blonde had rendered his pupil unconscious. He and the elderly guy waited for the water pillar to awaken after the misunderstanding was cleared up. It was not surprised when the blonde almost knocked him out again because the man actually tried to fight him again after he woke up and his filthy anxieties still make him scowl, but that's not the point. He was explaining the scenario to his old disciple when Urokodaki-san interrupted him. The man was hesitant to believe that the blonde wasn't a demon, but he did believe that Naruto wasn't a demon. He was forced to believe it when the blonde went outside during the day and lived. The blonde was back to his best after a few more weeks of relaxation, so he began by learning how to use Kusanagi and Kubikura Bocho. He had never truly wielded a sword until the battle with Kaguya, and that was mostly due to instinct rather than skill, so at first it was difficult. Thankfully, Kadaki decided to assist him. The man then just left him alone, and to his relief, the two were able to strike up a conversation. The old man offered him some scrolls on more complicated forms after the elder had taught him the basics. The blonde was especially grateful for the Jiji's guidance on how to use his breath. Though initially perplexed by the patterns for inhaling and exhaling, he was eventually able to do it right. Breathing and core energy have incredible combined benefits. The senior almost suffered a heart attack when a Kage Bunshin arrived. The blonde began training to become an expert in what he had been taught after being questioned more. The blonde was convinced after a few months that he was a master of Ken's spirit art, but he needed his own form, just like any other master. In order to reverence the Biju, he therefore devised ways to align his forms with their fundamental vitality. He's currently working on Matatabi's shape and will soon start on Isabu's. Not to mention that he's in the shack right now, just being lazy. The red-eyed adolescent blew out the candles surrounding him and stood up, letting his back and other bones crack and letting out a sigh of relief before leaving the shack to go set up traps around the mountain. Hope the kid is prepared for hell. Two sets of footfall approached the small cabin, one smooth and peaceful, the other heavy and frantic. Kadaki and Ninja Slayer have arrived, escorted by Nezuko. When the elder opened his shanty door and saw that the blonde was gone, he realized that he wouldn't have to wait until tomorrow to teach Ninja Slayer before abandoning some of his belongings. The hope in his speech almost made the child smile, for he was so unaware of the hell that awaited him. So did I pass the test? The test begins now, climb the mountain, he whispered, his eyes wide with horror. The old man almost burst out laughing. After putting Nezuko off at the hut, Kadaki and Ninja Slayer began their hike up the mountain. The world is now divided into two groups, those who struggle and die, and those who succeed and can withstand the most trying circumstances with minimal effort. The latter is Ninja Slayer at the moment. At this point, the preteen was having trouble breathing and seemed on the verge of passing out from tiredness. I'm already tired, my legs are getting weak, I'm dizzy, stated the man. Luckily, his sensei stopped a few steps in front of him. The former Hashira turned to face his pupil and stated, Now you must descend to the house at the foot of the mountain. This time I will not wait until sunrise. Later, when Ninja Slayer saw his sensei go, he was taken aback. Is that all? The preteen was a little surprised at how simple the assignment was before he realized his surroundings. He was starting to control his breathing a bit better. Oh, I see. He thinks I'll get lost in this dense fog. He smiled and ran back to the top, saying, I've already committed Kadaki's scent to memory. Adding, I have a keen nose, so it's easy for me to return before sunrise. Even if I can't see him, I can still follow him all the way, he thought before his foot hit a piece of rope. The Ninja Slayer let out a cry of pain as a hail of orange-painted boulders battered him before he realized what was happening. Who is hurling rocks? Paint is all over my eye. Because he was too preoccupied with his current issue to see the danger close, the preteen slipped into the hole. A covered pit! The Ninja Slayer landed hard on his back and then realized his real problem, peering up into the starless night sky. Ninja Slayer said, I understand, as he rose from the hard ground and began to climb out of the pit, ignoring the pain in his back. These are all traps. Which is the issue? The youngster began to crawl out when he felt a length of rope flex beneath his palm. Oh! The boy in the Haori swiftly lifted his hand and stood up, attempting to scan the area for any potential danger. He didn't see the log behind him until it landed squarely on his back, knocking him to the ground, and he hurried to his feet. He let out a big breath as the seriousness of the situation suddenly hit him. Crap, 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 he said. The pupil resumed taking deep breaths and began to look around him once more. If I keep setting off every trap, I won't get down the mountain by morning, he stated. The air is so thin that I can barely breathe. That's a lot worse than the mountain where we lived. In a slight fear, the ninja slayer began to clutch his chest, which housed his heart. Ninja Slayer began running as fast as he could in the hopes of arriving at an area with thicker air, but doubt was weighing on his mind. That's why I feel so exhausted and lightheaded, he murmured. Am I going back? I might pass out. At the same time, he continued to fortify his resolve while running. No! I must go back. The adolescent began dragging his sandals over the floor to stop. Breathing became easier the more comfortable he became. Get your breathing under control, he exclaimed. And sniff out each of those traps. Ninja Slayer closed his eyes and concentrated shortly after he was able to detect his whereabouts. Knowing where the traps would be, the Ninja Slayer opened his eyes and began to run, his determination burning strongly within him. Avoiding the logs flying at him and never turning around to see what had happened, the Ninja Slayer struck a rope that was lying on the ground with his foot and continued running. The child kept running, avoiding a rope that was hanging in midair but letting his foot brush against the top of another that was close to the ground. After striking another length of rope, the Ninja Slayer almost stumbled, but he managed to steady himself in time to avoid being struck by wooden planks. Careful to avoid a few more traps, the burgundy youth continued running and ducked to the left just in time to see another log fly at him. Indeed! I've got it! I've got it! After all, human-placed traps have a slightly different scent. Unfortunately, the moment he took another step, a bamboo that had been painted orange and concealed was used to raise him into the air and place him in the stomach. Then, while in the air, the Ninja Slayer was hit by another painted bamboo, which surrounded him with a dust cloud. Through confused vision, the adolescent saw 4 more orange bamboos trying to slam him again as he groggily tried to lift himself up. But that doesn't mean. The Ninja Slayer raised his arms to try to prepare for the contact that came soon after, which resulted in pain all over his arms. All of a sudden, I'm athletic enough to avoid them all. He walked awkwardly through the dust, raising his hand to steady himself on a tree, but he continued on. I will come back no matter what. With his eyes full of vigor, the Ninja Slayer sank slightly to the ground, braced himself, and began rushing down the mountain once more. Nezuko! He continued to walk, oblivious to the slow-moving red eyes watching him from above. He grinned when he noticed nearly half of the 13-year-old's body was coated in orange paint. Well, he is determined, I'll give him that, he added. Ninja Slayer, you are going to be a fun guy. Back at the shack, Nezuko was stretched out on a futon before being covered with blankets made of urokodaki. The elderly guy peered out his wooden window just before dawn, but it made no difference because the doors slid open to reveal an orange Ninja Slayer who was fatigued and injured, breathing heavily and raggedly. I have returned, was all the child could manage to mutter before he fell to his knees. Urokodaki started to think about what Jo had sent him, and then he made up his mind. I accept you as my student Ninja Slayer Kamadu, the woman said as the light finally broke, revealing the woodland that had been concealed from the night and a particular blonde atop the roof. Nuda couldn't help but laugh as he gazed at the comatose preteen, knowing that this would never be sufficient to compare to the other forms of torture he had in store for Ninja Slayer. The blonde leaped off the roof, picked up the orange-streaked child with tenderness, stripped him of his paint-streaked garments, and quickly laid him down on the futon Urokodaki had just laid out. Using the damp towel Urokodaki had prepared, Naruto sat on his knees and began rubbing the orange parts of Ninja Slayer's body thoroughly in order to get rid of the blood and grime. How did he do? Urkadaki's voice asked him. He smiled as he recalled the boy's resolve shining in his eyes, recalling fond memories of his 13-year-old self fighting through his toughest moments. Overall, he did a good job, he added. Naruto put his Gigi over the child and looked up at the cloud, saying, Ninja Slayer isn't athletic enough, but he is a quick learner and, like you mentioned before, has a great sense of smell. He continued, conjuring up images of Ninja Slayer in agony. Knows how to ignore pain too, Naruto added, turning his head once more. On the second day, he decided to heal the majority of his wounds because he was unable to help the child feel better. As he put his palm on Ninja Slayer's chest, a green glow began to radiate from it. Irio, mystical palm. The Ninja Slayer's wounds began to heal rather immediately, but Naruto cut off the supply of core energy to his hand, leaving the unconscious boy with minor bruises and scrapes. It never ceases to surprise me how you do it, the Gigi remarked, still staring at the less hurt boy with wonder. Like I said before, it's a manifestation of physical and spiritual energy, Naruto continued, after a few months of being here, concluding that while individuals did have physical and spiritual energy, it was not as much as in his planet. Though everything has yin and yang, he found that people seem to choose the material, while devils prefer the spiritual. Total focus breathing was a prime example of physical strength since, as far as he could tell from Urokodaki, only swordsmen employed breathing to enhance their physical talents, such as increased strength and prolonged stamina. He discovered, however, that although demons do not use body-enhancing methods, they do have nin spirit art-like abilities, such as a great healing factor or the capacity to manipulate specific bodily parts. This does not, however, mean that demons were only found in yin. Glancing at the still boy, he picked up the futon and slid it carefully across the floor, putting Ninja Slayer across from Nezuko, who tried to approach her comatose sibling while she was sleeping. As he looked at the two siblings and their clear closeness, a smile came to his face. Hell, it made him wonder what could have happened if he had even had a sibling. Naruto glanced to the old man who was watching him closely and grinned like a fox. Let's give him hell. In the early hours of the morning, Ninja Slayer was writing in his personal diary when he stopped to scowl and look at his sister, who was asleep. Urokodaki shut his book, pulled on his haori, and looked at his sister once more as he got ready. Let's go, said the elder, and the student closed the door. In the highlands, a solemn Urokodaki talks to a similarly solemn ninja killer. I am a trainer. I literally train swordsmen. There are many trainers, and each of them train their pupils with their own regimen in their own locations. Ninja Slayer is unaware that Naruto is lounging on a tree limb above the preteen and listening to the old man converse. To join the Demon Slayer Corps, you must survive the final selection process held on MT, Fujike-sane. Whether or not you're eligible for the final selection is up to me. I'm pretty sure you mean us Urokodaki Gigi, Naruto finally states. Ninja Slayer twists his head in surprise and makes an incoherent noise as he tries to determine where he heard the mysterious voice. When the youth with the burgundy hair turns to look at his sensei, he sees that his mask is facing the tree above him, so he also turns to look. He had no idea that horns would stab him in both eyes. He pushes away from the stinging tool, but the ninja killer grabs his suffering eyes and falls on his behind. A slow but equally worried voice cuts in. Oh, are you okay? The ninja killer stops touching his eyes and opens them painfully to look at the one who injured him. He saw a devil in the sun and almost fainted. The boy wearing the haori gets to his feet, stiffens, looks at his teacher, and stops when he doesn't hear back. The blonde isn't trying to attack, so the ninja slayer turns his head once more and looks at the demon, quoted right here. Sorry, still need to get used to these, he says. The kid hears his sensei's voice and turns to face the older man. Ninja Slayer, he says. This man is Naruto. He is going to be your mentor as well, Ninja Slayer adds, with a look of amazement in his eyes. Isn't Naruto-san a monster, Urokodaki-san? The checkered-clad boy looked at the blonde and murmured. Ask him yourself, shaking slightly at his sensei's candor. Naruto actually took long to answer, stating, The horns and whiskers are due to my heritage. Since he is still unclear of who he is, the whiskers came from being in his mother's womb while Kurama was locked inside her, and the horns formed after he absorbed Kagaya. The preteen's disappointed countenance caught the shinobi's attention as he snapped out of his trance. His devious grin made Ninja Slayer uneasy. As Urokodaki Gigi stated, I'm going to train you too, he said. The shinobi pulled out the kunai. Run down the mountain, little mouse. He hauled ass because, despite his many questions about the blonde, the burgundy boy could sense an aura that smacked of harsh anguish from a fearsome shinobi who had once appeared nice. As he watched the younger child leave, Naruto moaned, but then he felt a fire within of him. Matatabi has always loved a good pursuit. Today, I'm going to begin journaling for Nezuko. A kunai flew near the ninja slayer's cheek as he sprang over a rope and jerked his head. Thankfully, Naruto-san is helping me. As I descend the mountain again today, I will practice as hard as I can to prevent dying during the final selection. Suddenly a log materialized to his right. The adolescent gasped in surprise and quickly ducked his head as the piece of wood narrowly missed him before he had to jump over another rope. After descending the mountain day after day, I'm learning how to stay clear of the majority of the dangers. As he sprinted through the bush, the ninja slayer kept swerving to the left and right to dodge the shuriken that were thrown at him. It's because I've become more stronger and have become more adept at smelling things. Several kunai came out of the trees as soon as they scented metal. A sweating ninja slayer dodges to his right, missing the knives and colliding with a tree behind him, then has to duck as more shuriken fly past his head as he gasps in amazement once again. The traps are getting harder and harder. Sadly, Naruto walked on his back, smiling maniacally as he watched the poor teenager strain his muscles to keep himself from falling to his death. The ninja slayer almost fell into a pit full of rusted and broken swords, but he caught himself by slamming his hands and feet against the hole's edge. They may really want to kill me. The ninja slayer looks anxiously at his sleeping sister while he is writing in his journal. I dropped today with a sword in hand, but the weapon severely restricted my range of motion. Urokodaki and Naruto are both observing Ninja Slayer as he sprints around. His two mentors watch, one pleased, the other unconcerned, as the teenager jumps over a root and keeps running, but a rope snags his foot and drags him many yards above the earth. With the sword, I can't help but fall into all the traps. As he attempts to escape his current circumstance, the elevated child is observed wobbling and shaking. Ninja Slayer is seen cutting his sword downward and yelling, 991, as he counts his repetitions. I have been swinging the sword every day, not just today, and I swing it till my arms nearly fall off after I descend the mountain. 1000, as he finishes every rep, the Ninja Slayer yells. An additional 500, till Urokodaki showed up and demanded additional. The child's face was pale and shocked, and he wanted to scream. With 100 sit-ups and squats after, the blonde said, speaking from behind Urokodaki. Ninja Slayer did cry a little. Ninja Slayer is writing in his journal once more, but his fatigue from the day is making it difficult for him to stay awake. Eventually, he succumbed to the temptation and fell asleep with pen in hand, still sitting up. A blonde shinobi stepped through the door of the room. With a sigh, Naruto carefully removed the pen from the boy's fingers, raised the teenager, and set him down on the futon, which was his designated sleeping location. Naruto put some sheets over him, blew out the candles, and walked out of the room, closing the door. Swords break easily, Yuro Kadaki told his student. That's what he told me beforehand. There was some rush straw in the middle of the ground. Naruto was just sleeping on the nearby ground, and Ninja Slayer was staring at Yuro Kadaki as he gripped his sword hilt and pointed it down. Although the blade is strong in the vertical direction, it is weak in the horizontal direction, therefore you have to apply force directly along it. The elder cut the straw diagonally with ease. The force applying direction and the blade's direction must line up exactly. A startled ninja killer stared in awe as Naruto snored a little. If you ever damage the blade, in other words, break it, I'll snap your bones as well, he added in a threatening tone. As the ninja slayer's expression shifted from amazement to a scowl and finally to fear, Naruto's stomach rumbled in response. Ninja Slayer anticipated to read his journal as he came up from his sleep, but instead he saw darkness. The Ninja Slayer looked at his sister's silhouette as he turned his head. The burgundy child carefully left the blankets, lit a candle, and went back to writing in his journal. Nezuko, I'll continue to work hard, okay? He inquired. Naruto sighed in exhaustion when he heard several sounds outside the chamber, indicating that Ninja Slayer was awake. The Gaki is more stubborn than me, I'll need to follow him at this rate. Yuro Kadaki and the Ninja Slayer are standing in the middle of a field, a little distance apart, both brandishing swords. The youngster stares at his master until his eyes start to shift to the right. Well? As his sensei looked over him, the Ninja Slayer fell to the ground and moaned in pain. Today was the only time I fell while training how to break my falls and quickly get out of any position. A pebble hit the adolescent in the leg as he got up and tried to move. When the Ninja Slayer fell to the ground, Naruto was standing there holding a basket full of rocks. Apart from ignoring the pain my opening could cause me. Raising his blade over his head with both hands, Ninja Slayer arose once more and began to run toward Yuro Kadaki with a battle cry and a comically determined demeanor. I intend to charge Yuro Kadaki-san with my sword in order to kill him. The elder merely shifted into his place. But Urkadaki-san is barehanded and unarmed. The former Hashira rushed forward, grabbed the hem of Ninja Slayer's shirt, and threw the screaming youngster against his back. He's so strong, though, that each time he throws me to the ground I roll. A boulder struck the boy with the burgundy hair in the hands, causing him to drop his sword and fall to the ground in pain. Naruto-san is also able to aim accurately. When Ninja Slayer unlocks their chamber door, he discovers Nezuko sleeping, as he does every other day. The adolescent closed the door and walked toward his sister until he was only a foot away. With a sad expression on his face, the orphan says, "I'm home, Nezuko," as he goes to his desk to start writing in his journal again. They open the door, place food on the wooden floor, and leave without noticing the shinobi. Today, I explored a number of forms and breathing techniques. Breathing with complete concentration? Ninja Slayer inquired, staring at his sensei bewildered. That's right, he remarked, nodding slightly to his pupil. And I'm going to teach you all 10 of the water-breathing forms. As he pondered how fire would have been a better choice for the sensitive child, Naruto, who is meditating, just laughed. Remember to take a long breath so the oxygen flows into every cell in your body. This will enhance your body's natural healing power, and both stabilize and energize your spirit. The fact that Urokodaki was saying it exactly as he had months before amused the shinobi, who added, It's the same thing he said to me when I first started. Relax your upper body, while bracing your lower half. Ninja Slayer tried to portray the description as positively as possible. All right, take a breath. Ninja Slayer closed his eyes, took a long breath, and then let it out slowly. He gasped for air as Urokodaki hit him in the stomach with the palm of his hand. Gaha! Not true! The older leaped to his feet and saw the adolescent clutching his stomach and bending his legs as he exhaled sharply. Next! Forms! The Ninja Slayer took a sumo-like stance. All right. As in this way? Not true. Like this? Not true. This? Not true. This? Not true. Urokodaki, tired of all the absurd postures, repeatedly hit Ninja Slayer in the stomach before he gave in and let the boy weep in pain. I'm reprimanded for not bracing my stomach and clobbered to a pulp. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at Ninja Slayer's suffering and found this to be humorous. Then he told me to become one with the water. Perched on a cliff overlooking a waterfall are the student and sensei. Examining the edge, Ninja Slayer? The stoic elder ordered. Get in there! And then kicked him in the ass. Ninja Slayer stayed in midair, showing his frightened face before trying desperately to run on air. Unfortunately, gravity took its toll and the teenager began to plummet into the seas. Nezukoku! He splashed into the sea in agony. Naruto and Urokodaki noticed the burgundy youth floating away, face down in the ocean, when they looked over the edge. The senior couldn't help but notice that the blonde's languid face had a drier expression. You are a horrible being. All he got was a little twitch of the cheek. The Ninja Slayer stands by the waterfall, his hands clasped together. Nezuko! I'm water! Ninja Slayer was forced to the ground by the weight of the water because it is difficult to carry a waterfall on your back. Urokodaki-san contacted a doctor right away to check Nezuko out because she hadn't been conscious for 6 months, but he found nothing wrong. The Ninja Slayer went over to his sister and took a quick look at her unconscious form. She doesn't typically sleep this way, though. The eldest brother bent down and looked at her forehead. Every day I worry about the possibility that one day I'll wake up and find out she's dead. The adolescent sat up and stared at her, afraid that she might vanish the moment he looked away. But luckily, Naruto-san is always there to console me. A strong hand touched the teen's shoulder, causing him to flinch. The elder smiled reassuringly at the lad in the haori as he turned to face him. It's going to be all right, she has your stubbornness after all. The boy with the burgundy hair gave a shaky nod, stood up, and wiped away the tears that were obstructing his vision before returning the smile. Let's go, Gigi is waiting. Hello? My descents are getting riskier, and the air is even thinner where I train. In the previous scene, the Ninja Slayer is running down the mountain again as Naruto is throwing his weapons at the youth. After jumping to avoid a shuriken that was aimed at his leg, the adolescent grabbed onto a nearby limb and threw himself upward to avoid several kunai that were aimed at his head. Naruto-san has also taught me to make use of my environment. As gravity began to take its toll on him, the adolescent flipped forward and landed with a roll. By keeping up his momentum, Ninja Slayer was able to stand up and continue running, which allowed him to exit the forest without coming into contact with any knives. In the background, Naruto was grinning. It's good that he has become more conscious. Furthermore, Naruto-san is now more dangerous. The shinobi accelerated till he was only a few paces behind his pupil in an attempt to test him further. Naruto put his tools away and took his Kubikuru Bocho hilt. Be ready, the ninja slayer was instructed, as a blast of cool air was directed into his ear. The ninja killer let out a startled cry and tried desperately to speed up. Bija Art, Ichibi Rockfall. When he slammed his blade down several meters below, tons of rock were suddenly broken and turned to sand, causing the earth to begin to disintegrate. After his makeshift pitfall, Naruto sheathed Kubikuru Bocho and jumped up onto the nearby trees to see the ninja slayer make his getaway. He touched the Chikuto in spite of this. With wide eyes, the adolescent tried to get away, almost falling many times. He jumped off a falling rock and managed to hang on the edge of the pitfall when he noticed that he was slowly starting to plummet into the ditch. Using his knees and feet, the adolescent tried to elevate himself, and soon he was rewarded with both arms on solid ground, which meant he only had to drag the rest of his body up. The frightened adolescent turned to face the ditch, which had several feet of sand at its bottom, and gasped for oxygen when his entire body was on solid ground. Don't be distracted by the aftermath, murmured a cold voice behind the youngster again, and the burgundy-haired boy fled. Unfortunately, with a Chikuto wielding a Naruto, it wouldn't be easy. Bija Art Nibi, Hell's Grounds. Suddenly, a blue fire hotter than the sun consumed the Chikuto. After entering the ground, the fire began to grow and finally covered the dirt with flames. Meanwhile, the ninja slayer climbed a tree as soon as he saw the Chikuto. I've long since lost the ability to question Naruto-san's abilities. Ninja Slayer paused to regain his breath, then as he had been instructed, he began sprinting around the branches of every tree in the area, realizing that the ground was not safe at the moment. I'm worried for my safety because I know Naruto-san has more moves hidden, but he's only used the same two so far. Even while Naruto was sliding behind him, he was swinging a Kubikuru Bocho, so the youngster had to hop and roll repeatedly to avoid getting cut. As we watch Ninja Slayer slip down a slope, we can see that his clothes are burnt and covered in dirt, and he has several cuts and tears. Then he is seen climbing the side of the mountain, but he stumbled while trying to hold on to a branch and flinched back when a shuriken cut straight through the root. Luckily, he was able to hold on to the ledge and pull himself up. I'm constantly worried that I might not make it. Ninja Slayer cut in half a knife box before Naruto, and clones, began throwing numerous blades at the teen from different directions. The Ninja Slayer assumed the stance he had been instructed to take, and used the flat of his blade to successfully block and deflect every knife that was thrown at him. Before the sun dawned, Naruto came up to Ninja Slayer, patted his head, and grinned. We have nothing more to teach you, Naruto and Urokadaki declared, standing before a breathless and slouched ninja killer. They suddenly told me a year after I arrived at Mount Sajiri that you're responsible for the rest, whether you're able to advance to the following level. Straightening his back, Ninja Slayer looked at both of his professors and saw Naruto's small smirk. Follow me. The three of them were walking through a snow-covered forest. This part of the mountain was new to the ninja killer, who gazed in wonder. Naruto's mind was distracted. Only last year was he able to finish Isabu's shape, and he had just started working on Son Goku's. He had finished both Shikaku's and Matatabi's forms in a few months, thus this was a big setback because he had only finished one in a year. This was primarily due to the fact that he had to help Ninja Slayer every day and could only train at night. Yet he had chosen to go with Ninja Slayer on his quest. The adolescent had gained his love in a similar way as Konohamaru, and he now regarded Ninja Slayer as a younger brother. Before the final selection, which occurred in a year, he hoped to finish all of the Biju's forms. That meant he would have to spend all of his time refining and developing the shapes. Regretfully, this also meant that he was unable to help Ninja Slayer with his impending trial. The older one stopped suddenly. As he looked in front of them, the adolescent gasped uncontrollably. The three were facing a huge boulder that had the same ropes and ornaments. "If you can slice this boulder, I will allow you to enter the final selection." The Ninja Slayer looked at the elder, and then back at the boulder with a look of incredulity. "I doubt I'll be able to cut through a boulder or anything that a sword can cut through since my weapon will break." His face was not one of disbelief this time, but one of despair. Urokodaki started to back off. "Urokodaki-san, please wait! Urokodaki-san!" The old man went on his stroll. "After that, Urokodaki-san never taught me anything else." The Ninja Slayer looked at Naruto, his last hope. Naruto-san dash. However, he stopped talking when a strong palm touched his head. When he looked up, he saw that Naruto had a peculiar grimace on his face, one that was more remorseful than disapproving. "Ninja Slayer." The teen's attention was now on the shinobi. "How do you plan on growing stronger?" surprised the child, who thought for a moment before the burgundy boy began to speak. "You and Urokodaki-san could both teach me dash," he began, but was interrupted. The statement, "That's where the problem lies, how do you expect to become better if someone's always giving you the answers?" stopped the young children's train of thinking. With a groan, Naruto looked at his junior. The subject of the first Demon Slayer's dash had taken up all of Ninja Slayer's attention. Want to know how, without anyone to teach them how to kill demons, they rose to become the most powerful swordsmen of their time? The Ninja Slayer gave a silent nod. Naruto motioned for Ninja Slayer to join him as he sat on the ground with his legs down. The blonde's only response to the adolescent was pain and experience. "It took a long time for people to figure out how to kill a demon without the sun, and during that time many humans suffered, whether it be through the loss of a friend or a family member. Humans always lost someone precious to them each day that passed until a demon was killed with a blade made of a certain metal," Naruto said as the Ninja Slayer like a sponge that absorbed information. It was the greatest kind of news people had received, but there wasn't enough of the blades to go around. At the time, the samurai had inhabited the land, and as far as I know they were the only ones who knew how to use a katana, so it was obvious to who the blades were sent. So for those that weren't fortunate enough to learn from a samurai had to be self-taught until they met someone who would teach them. Naruto continued to speak while keeping the Ninja Slayer in eye contact. The humans who taught themselves were the ones that survived in the end. They were the ones that were prepared to learn the ways of the blade even if they didn't know how to use one. Using the experience they gained through their own teachings gave them an advantage over others that were taught. Naruto stood up and walked away. "Humans get stronger when they are prepared. You already know the basics of what we have taught you, although it is up to you, Ninja Slayer, if you're willing to teach yourself." He turned his head slightly and a small smile came to his lips. "But I know you will." Naruto vanished in a flurry of leaves shortly after. That day, Naruto-san also left me, but not before giving me one final lesson. Rising to his feet, the ninja slayer faced the boulder. Your own efforts have made you stronger.